We've probably all heard Romans 13, which is the passage that discusses how God has appointed all of the powers that be, and therefore we are to submit to all authority. And I hear a lot of people abuse this verse as if to suggest that no matter what government context you're in, you should always obey the law, as if there is no room for civil disobedience when maybe the law goes against our principles as Christians. So there's three things I want you to notice about Romans 13 if you do take the time to read it and study it for yourself. One thing is that he doesn't say every individual in power has been appointed by God, but he says the powers that be are appointed by God. The word is power or authority. So perhaps every office or every position is ordained by God, but not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single individual in some position of authority is doing God's will. And I think all we have to do is look through scripture from Genesis through Revelation to see that that is the case. A second thing I want you to notice about the passage is that it says the reason we are to submit to those authorities is because they are punishing evil and rewarding good. And so we don't need to fear anything if we're doing good, but if we're doing evil, then of course authority is very much something to be feared because we're going to be punished for our evil. So in other words, having some form of government to defend our rights and to do justice is a good thing, is a biblical thing. Anarchy, maybe not so much. That's how I take that passage. But what that means is that if the government is doing something evil, if they are actually calling evil evil and calling evil good and calling good evil, like Isaiah talks about, then there might actually be room for us to obey God and not the government. We see even examples of this in the Old Testament, such as Daniel and the Hebrews when they're in the Babylonian captivity, civilly disobeying the laws that they were commanded to obey because it would go against their custom. Or even in the time of the Maccabean revolt, the mother and her several sons who all chose to not give in to breaking their law and eating a piece of food that they're forbidden from eating as Jews. Rather, they would be tortured and even die for their faith than break the law of God in the hope of the resurrection, which then is talked about in Hebrews chapter 11. And then finally, one other thing I want you to notice about about Romans 13 is that Paul then goes on to say that we're to then render unto the powers what is due, whether that be honor or tribute or custom. And that's very similar to the passage in Mark chapter 12, where Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And in that case, he's specifically talking about taxes and how, as Christians, we're to, just as we're to give to God what is due God, we're to give to the government what we owe to it, even though taxes aren't fun. Like, we should still obey, we should still pay those. But that was specifically in the context of the Roman Empire, which was very anti-Jew in many ways. We actually live in a uniquely free society, a democratic republic in America, where we have religious liberty. We actually have the opportunity to participate, not just the opportunity, but the way our country is set up, we have a civic obligation to vote and to be involved even beyond that. So I would argue that from that passage, it has a broader spiritual implication than just taxes, whether it's Jesus's words or Romans. Paul in Romans actually goes beyond just taxes. He mentions tribute, but then he also says if there's honor, if there's custom, can we not add to that if there is voting that is due in the system of government that we find ourselves in? Ought we not to do so? And one last thought on that, because I know a lot of Christians will try to use the passage to maybe try to steer away from being political or being civically engaged. But the thing is, would you rather have Christians have a voice in government and those who share our values, who are trying to adhere to the Bible in how they vote, in how they legislate? Would you rather those individuals be the ones that are in control, or have all of us who have that thought, who are Christians, who are believers, to withdraw from public life and then let the void be filled by whoever has the opposite values? Which would be the more responsible thing to do as a Christian if we have the opportunity to make a difference and to vote for those who maybe are going to better reflect our values in public office, or the option to refrain from voting and let evil take over? Which would be the more responsible choice as a Christian? Just a couple thoughts to pray about, think about as you're reading the scriptures. Obviously, this is a decision between you and God for everyone when it comes to how we engage civically, but hope that helps.